So just as an introduction, this is Ruthless and Registered.
Thanks, Nick. I'm gonna kind of like flesh out some of the ideas we're talking about, but more from like a sociological, like systems of oppression perspective. I just thought this data visualization piece kind of like enhanced um, how like voter turnout ends up in, and how also just critical like these upcoming elections are. And if you actually want to see more data visualization pieces, stats class with Gemma, Lauren, Matt, which I'm actually also in, we created some pieces, and there's everything from like different kind of like voter turnouts among like race and ethnicity to like class, and then like silent green majority. So you can definitely feel free to scroll through the gallery. I just thought this was an interesting visualization because, you know, obviously despite like the Voting Rights Act being passed in 1965, we still have lower turnouts among communities concentrated in certain areas, whether that's layers of like different types of accessibility, like whether it's rural and or maybe like more poverty or like more lower income areas. I'm actually from Bay Area, and that is quite purple if you notice it near San Francisco, which is neat to observe. And I'm sure you guys can also look at where you are and whether your area has a higher turnout. And I will be going into this a little bit later on in my third slide about like whether you live in a swing state, and if you don't live in a swing state, how you could still help out through adopt a state. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there are quite a few barriers to break down for voter accessibility. I feel like also a lot of disenfranchised communities feel like their vote doesn't count or matter, or it's being bought. And I think taking these into account, especially if you are like a privileged student who has the privilege to vote, these are some factors to take in that you probably won't be thinking about. For instance, like language accessibility, and kind of also, I guess, that combines with internet, just acquiring information and also ensuring that you don't get misinformation is something like that media literacy component that tends to be missing. And also just not like having that, even though there is like language assistance that is required, I think after 2006, there are still some barriers because sometimes like the poll workers there aren't quite like qualified or training or really can't, are like multilingual or bilingual. So providing those resources are actually really important to bridge the gap there. And there's also just like the time component. So misinformation can also be compromised. And also just for like non-English speakers whose like native language differs, there's just, and to have different proficiencies, there's barriers that exist there. For identification, obviously, like if you don't have a government issued like state ID, whether you're undocumented, you're an incarcerated folk, or maybe for like transgender people as well, that is something that remains as a barrier. And then I guess kind of redistricting and rural purges kind of go together in terms of like racial discrimination. So areas where they're like higher like density and like more concentrated tend to have like a lower amount of like poll workers, longer lines. There's just a disproportionate of like services and assistance being provided. And with rural purges specifically, like they'll deem you illegitimate and they'll just like purge you and like remove you because you didn't input your information correctly or you didn't have that information. And so I think Voda Familia, which I can put in the chat box later on, is doing some work to help combat that, and especially Texas. And so, yeah, it's just, it's like where these also, if you do end up doing it in person, and especially with COVID, there's just like, you have like family members, like immunocompromised, like disabled people, that could also like translate into longer wait times and or having to go to a far location. So where these poll locations are also opening up in person matters. And then there's also just kind of like mistrust in the mail. So again, having like active participation and civic engagement for disenfranchised communities who want to vote can really help in sustaining the longevity of shared communal governments, especially in local areas. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of QR readers, but this is just to really encourage like Pitzer folks or students who, or anyone who really wants to like help leverage their positionality to intervene. If you speak another language, I basically just dropped in the first two a link to AmericanBar.org, and they have like different voter assistance and hotlines. So there's one, I believe, Asian Americans Advancing Justice. So if you speak Asian language, that helps. There's also Voto Latina if you speak Spanish. Yeah, those also just help with like if you want a phone bank or text bank. So even if you are like underage and you want to enlist like your siblings or like family or friends, those are just a great way to like engage also the youth, even if they want to like help contribute and they're like passionate about politics. I mean, there's ones like that if you're whatever aligns with your political affinity or party, like swing left, but then there's also like probably more neutral ones like ACLU or like I'm not sure how some of these are, but like Invisible and League of Women Voters is Let American Vote. Spread the Vote, that one's a big one, and Spread the Vote actually is also doing some work with helping people in jail and incarcerated folks. So the links that I provided below are, well, so there is Project Orange, and that is based in Austin. And then there is All Voting is Local, which is actually based in Wisconsin. And then Vote by Mail in Jail, I think doesn't have a, I don't think they're based in anywhere. They're actually just doing the work nationally. But you can like write a postcard or write a letter for like information to incarcerated people, especially in their area, for like local ballot measures, or also just check up on what yours, if your propositions or ballots or your laws are offering voting rights to people in parole or people who have criminal convictions and felony. Yeah. And then I also put organized voter registration drive in your area. There's, I think, Rock Your Vote. And so like, if you wanna, I don't know, like maybe in your area, put up QR readers in the park or somewhere around you and like just like print it out and like paste it and redirect people to resources. That could really help, especially in areas where you feel like voter turnout might be lower. You can, I think also the website just provides like a lot of like guides to redirect to more other resources. So you guys can totally check that out. And then there's actually, it's quite neat, you can track maileds for your ballot for accountability, because, you know, like once you send it out, you don't know if it's actually like going there or like it's being received. So now there is like a new system, so you can get in the QR reader for that. And then there is Adopt a State. So that's what I was kind of mentioning earlier. If you don't live in, like for instance, I live in California, and you want to help out in other swing states, you just basically sign up for the newsletter and they will send you steps to help offer intervention. And the last thing is becoming a poll worker, which I believe Jack will go more into. And again, it's just really important because, yeah, I think he'll flesh that out more. But I agree a lot with becoming a poll worker, especially now under COVID.